Okay, so a little bit of a quickie. I'll see if I'll keep this one down to 5 minutes. And I want to talk about change and an exchange that was taking place about whether people can change on YouTube, on Twitter, with the academic agent, Morally Grey and FriendEd. And I said I'd put my contribution on a video because it was more ready than I can say in 140 characters. First off, just the elephant in the room, or the cactus on the side of the shot, which is deliberate today. It wasn't the other day. Where I was in a massive rush. As I said at the time, my oven chips were going to burn, and that was the truth. My oven chips were going to burn. I know that's not particularly highbrow. I dragged my microphone out. I'd not dragged the camera out. Disappointingly, in terms of my own personal vanity, I received quite a number of comments from people saying they preferred looking at the cactus to looking at me. So I'm taking that one on the chin. I'm going to try and take that in a positive light. These are parts of the barbs that you have to deal with on YouTube. So there you go. I framed you a little shot there. For my North American viewers especially, you know, imagine you can see the cattle in the background there. It's like the fucking buffalo sweeping across the plain with a cactus in the foreground or something like that. It's about as close as you're going to get to that in northern Lincolnshire. Anyway, but I wanted to talk about change in these three individuals, and Morally Grey took a very positive position that he thinks that people on YouTube can change, and FriendEd and an academic agent a little bit more pessimistic about that. My perspective is that actually people can make significant change. And I think significant change is a two-part process, and it's the second part of that process actually where YouTube tends to hold people in their positions, and the monetization of YouTube has perhaps made that worse. So the first process is, I think, that we start to digest the opinions of others and maybe sometimes come to a point where we start to question our own positions and seriously question them rather than just giving that lip service. And then you reach a kind of tipping point, don't you? You reach that tipping point where you think, actually, I cannot keep propping up the positions. I've fought the good fight for this particular position now, but I don't really feel like I can keep on that path. And that's a really difficult thing to do. To say to people, well, do you know what, that person you were talking to half an hour ago or a day ago that's been arguing for the same thing, that has been arguing for the same thing for the last 2 years, is now totally flipping over to the other side. For a start, it makes you look like you're a bit of a cynical, manipulative person, because hang on a minute, you must have undergone a process here, and yet you haven't made us aware of that. You've kept arguing tooth and nail for A, whereas you've been erring towards B for a period of time. So for that reason, I think people want to withdraw from a conversation. And the other reason that people want to withdraw from a conversation is that it allows us to save a bit of face. It's not just that we don't have to answer those difficult questions. It's also that it allows us to save a bit of face. If there's a bit of clear blue water between the views we have now and the views that we were espousing before, we can look back at ourselves a year ago or 6 months ago and say, well, that was a different person then, you know, and now my views have all changed. But if that different person was only yesterday or only 3 or 4 days ago, I think that I propose that is a much, much harder thing to do. So my experience has been when people have demonstrated a big change in their position, it is usually followed on from them withdrawing from YouTube. Now, has the change taken place whilst they've withdrawn from YouTube? Well, that's usually how it's portrayed, but I think in the main, that was just the second part of the process. The doubts crept in. The desire to change their position was there, and that was perhaps one of the things which led to them withdrawing from YouTube. And then once a few months have gone by, you can come back again and say, okay, this is the new me, and my approach has changed, or my opinions have changed, blah, 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 without losing quite so much face. So I think that's part of what it's about. The problem with YouTube is that it's not amenable to that. We end up talking about these things each and every day. And especially if you are drawing revenue. I mean, I draw a significant amount of revenue from YouTube, so this applies to me. But this isn't my main job. For some people, this is their main job. This is their sole source of income. And what do you do when that is the case? It applies in the media generally, by the way, not just on YouTube. If your opinions are your source of income, you cannot afford to withdraw for 6 months and then come back having reinvented yourself, A, because you might lose a tract of your audience, but 2, because you can't afford 6 months without earning any money. You can't afford to get off that gravy train for 6 months. And so, from a practical level, I think amongst the bigger names, the bigger guns, whether it's on YouTube or whether it's in the normal, the mainstream media or wherever it is, you can't really expect people to change their positions because they have too much invested in it. Not just too much invested in it intellectually, but too much invested in it on an ongoing financial basis. I think that hamstrings people, and I don't really know what the answer to that is. Okay, that's all I wanted to say. I hope you've enjoyed looking at my cactus, and bye for now.